It was supposed to be just another routine transatlantic flight, New York to London, a route flown thousands of times every year. The aircraft, a massive wide-body passenger jet, shimmered proudly in the winter sunlight as it lifted off the runway, engines roaring like a promise of adventure. Inside, the atmosphere was relaxed, families settling into their seats, business travelers opening laptops, children excited about flying high above the clouds. Cabin crew rolled carts down the aisles with warm smiles, serving snacks as passengers adjusted their screens to watch movies and enjoy the long journey ahead. Among those passengers was an 18-year-old girl named Ava Mitchell. She sat quietly by the window in row 23, her headphones on, staring at the shrinking world below. She wasn't traveling for fun like most teenagers her age. She was going to London for her first aviation scholarship interview. Flying was her dream since she was little. She had spent every weekend at a small airport learning to fly single, engine training aircraft, memorizing cockpit instruments and emergency manuals like other teens memorized song lyrics. But today she was just a passenger, a quiet dreamer with no idea that destiny was fast approaching. 2 hours into the flight, the sky looked calm, soft white clouds floating like peaceful mountains. Everything felt perfect, but fate often hides inside silence. Without warning, a sharp alarm beeped inside the cockpit. The captain's hands shook for a moment. He blinked hard, tried to speak, and suddenly collapsed onto the controls. The co-pilot jumped from his seat, trying to shake him awake, but within seconds he too coughed violently, gasping for air before falling unconscious. A horrifying silence swallowed the cockpit. Red alerts flashed like furious eyes across the instrument panels. The aircraft pitched slightly, dipping in altitude with no one holding the controls. Outside, passengers didn't notice at first. Drinks still clinked, laughter still echoed, but inside the cockpit, a life or death countdown had already begun. The head stewardess pressed the cockpit intercom again and again, no response. She tried the emergency override. Nothing. Her heartbeat thumped so loud she could hear it in her ears. She turned to her team, terror clear in her eyes. We have no pilots conscious," she whispered, her voice shaking. The cabin crew froze. They had trained for turbulence, for fire, for security threats, but not for both pilots collapsing midair. Panic spread among them like wildfire. The aircraft began to drift, a subtle, frightening movement that passengers started to feel. Confusion turned into fear as the plane rocked slightly, the engine hum changing tone. Then the announcement came, shaky and desperate. "Ladies and gentlemen, if there is anyone on board who can fly this aircraft, please come to the cockpit immediately." Gasps erupted everywhere. People looked around in disbelief, waiting for someone, anyone, to stand. The idea alone felt impossible. A passenger flying a massive commercial jet, a child started crying, a woman clutched her husband's arm. A man pressed his hands together and prayed. You could feel fear filling the air, heavier than oxygen. The flight attendants moved through the aisles, shouting louder now, "Please, anyone with flight experience, come forward." Their voices cracked with terror. Seats creaked, passengers shifted. Some looked toward the front, hoping someone brave was already walking up the aisle. But nobody did. People were frozen by shock, by the belief that this nightmare wasn't real. In row 23, Ava's heart pounded so hard she thought the world could hear it. She knew how to fly, but not a giant jet like this. Her mind filled with every aviation lesson she had ever taken, every emergency drill she had practiced. She could picture the cockpit layout, but the real thing would be far more complex. Hundreds of switches, autopilot settings, fuel management systems she had only read about in textbooks. She swallowed nervously, her hands trembled. She was just 18, just a student pilot. What if she touched the controls and made things worse? What if all 300 lives depended on her guesses? Her breathing grew fast, panic trying to win. She closed her eyes for a moment and saw her dad smile, heard his voice teaching her on their first flight in a tiny Cessna. Ava, flying isn't about fear, it's about trust. Trust your training. Trust yourself. Those words hit her like a spark in darkness. She looked around, terrified faces everywhere. People who wanted to live, families who wanted to land safely and go home, children who believed adults could always protect them. And right now, she was the only person who could try. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else as she slowly stood up from her seat. A passenger beside her grabbed her arm and asked, "Do you know what you're doing?" Ava looked terrified, but she nodded barely. I've practiced on smaller planes," she whispered. "I think I can try." The elderly woman sitting next to her pressed her trembling hand on Ava's and whispered, with tears in her eyes, "You are our hope. Go." That single sentence gave Ava strength she didn't know she had. She stepped into the aisle. Every footstep felt like a mile. People stared, praying silently that this young girl, this stranger, might save them. Some murmured words of encouragement. Some just watched, holding their breath. As Ava approached the front, the head stewardess saw her coming, eyes wide, desperate for a miracle. "Do you have flight experience?" she asked rapidly. I'm only a student pilot." Ava replied, her voice cracking, "But I know the basics. I've flown before, just not something this big." The stewardess didn't hesitate. She gently grabbed Ava's shoulders. "Right now, basics are more than we have. We need you." Ava nodded, even though fear was roaring inside her. The stewardess opened the cockpit door, revealing flashing alarms, lifeless pilots, and the urgent beeping that sounded like time running out. Ava inhaled sharply. The cockpit she had dreamed of sitting in one day now looked like a battlefield. She stepped inside and sat in the captain's seat, the seat of responsibility, the seat of impossible decisions. Her shaking fingers wrapped around the control yoke. It felt heavier than anything she had ever touched in her life. The intercom crackled to life as air traffic control finally connected. "Flight 329, we see you descending. Who is flying the aircraft? Please respond." Ava reached for the headset with trembling hands. "This is Ava Mitchell," she stuttered. I'm a student pilot. The captain and co-pilot are unconscious. I'm alone in the cockpit." A stunned pause filled her headset. Then a calm, powerful voice responded, "Okay, Ava, we're right here with you. Listen to us, and we'll help you fly this plane. You're not alone." Those words wrapped around her like a lifeline. Her fear didn't vanish, but it stepped aside just enough for courage to breathe. Behind her, passengers waited, silent, terrified. Ahead of her, the sky stretched wide, dangerous, but full of hope. Ava took a deep breath, tightened her grip, and whispered to herself, "You can do this, you have to." And at that exact moment, that split second, an ordinary girl became the only pilot on board. The flight that was supposed to be normal had just become a fight for 300 lives, and the world would soon learn her name. Ava's entire body trembled as she sat in the captain's seat, a place she had dreamed of but never imagined occupying in such a terrifying moment. The massive cockpit, filled with blinking lights, warning sirens, and unfamiliar panels, felt like the brain of a living giant she now had to command. Her fingers brushed over the controls. Everything was bigger, heavier, more intimidating than the tiny training aircraft she was used to. She swallowed, her throat dry as dust. She wasn't a professional. She wasn't ready for this, but time didn't care. Fear didn't care. Gravity certainly didn't care. The head stewardess leaned in close, her voice shaking but filled with desperate hope. "You can do this, Ava. They're connecting you to air traffic control. Just listen to them, just breathe." A static crackle in Ava's headset was followed by a calm voice, a lifeline in chaos. "Flight 329, this is London Control. Who am I speaking with?" Ava forced her voice out. I'm Ava Mitchell. I'm a student pilot. The captain and co-pilot are unconscious. I'm the only one who can fly right now." A pause. A deep breath, then the voice steadied even stronger. "Okay, Ava, we're here with you. Everything is going to be all right. First, look at your main display. The artificial horizon is the aircraft level." Ava's eyes darted across the instruments. So much data, so many lights, but she found it. The horizon line was tilted, sinking downward. The plane was losing altitude faster now, like a giant bird with broken wings. "We're descending," she whispered. "That's okay. You're going to pull the yoke gently, just enough to bring the nose up, slow, smooth, no sudden movements." Ava wrapped both hands around the yoke, palms sweaty, adrenaline flooding her veins. She pulled back gently, barely an inch. The plane shuddered, but the descent slowed. The alarm pitch changed. A moment later, stabilization. Gasps echoed behind her. The cabin crew, watching from the cockpit door, covered their mouths in shock. The fall had stopped. "You did it," the controller said. "Great job, Ava. You're flying the aircraft now." Those words landed heavier than the weight of the plane. She was flying a commercial jet, the lives of 300 people resting on her shaking hands. Autopilot, the voice continued. "Do you see the switch labeled /P engage? Turn it on. Just press it once." She hesitated. What if she pressed the wrong thing? What if she shut off something important? "You're doing fine," the voice reassured. "Trust yourself." Ava took a small breath and pressed the autopilot button. Instantly, some of the flashing warnings calmed. The plane's movement smoothed. A tiny bit of order returned to chaos. Passengers in the cabin felt the plane level out. A wave of relief washed through the seats. Mothers hugged their children tighter, strangers prayed, and some began to believe they might make it home alive. The fear didn't disappear, but hope finally flickered back into existence. Back in the cockpit, Ava wiped her forehead. She had stopped the fall, but it was just the first step. "How are the pilots?" she asked, glancing at the unconscious captain and co-pilot slumped beside her. "They're breathing," the stewardess replied, kneeling beside them, checking pulses. "But something is terribly wrong. They collapsed almost at the same time. Could be a medical issue. We're keeping them stable for now." Ava nodded, jaw clenched. She didn't know what took them down, but she knew she couldn't let the same happen to the passengers. She had to stay conscious. She had to stay strong. London Control spoke again, guiding her attention. "Ava, what's your current altitude?" She checked the altimeter, 31,000 feet. "Okay, we'll keep you there for now. Just hold course. You're doing amazing." The words helped, but stress was tightening around her like a vice. She couldn't afford to panic, not now. She looked out through the cockpit windows, endless sky stretching like a battlefield ahead, clouds glowing under the sun. So beautiful, so dangerous. "Have you ever flown a jet simulator?" ATC asked. "Yes," she said, voice a little stronger. "At the flight school, but this is nothing like that." "You're right," he replied. "But your training matters. You know the basics. Pitch, power, airspeed. That's all flying really is. And you've already proven you can do it." Ava nodded, repeating those words inside her mind like a prayer. Pitch, power, airspeed. Pitch, power, airspeed. Pitch, power, airspeed. She glanced again at the warning panels, fuel indicators, engine temperatures, hydraulic pressures. Too much information. She forced herself to focus only on what ATC asked her to. But a new alarm suddenly screamed, a shrill, angry beeping that stabbed her ears. "What's happening?" Ava panicked. "Don't worry," ATC replied, calm like a still lake. "Check the right engine status. Any caution message there?" Ava's eyes raced. "Yes. It says oil press low." "That's okay. We'll monitor it. You still have full thrust from both engines. You're safe." Safe. The word felt fragile in this storm of beeping alarms. Behind her, the cabin crew whispered updates, checking passengers, trying to keep them calm, but fear always found cracks. With every new sound from the cockpit, people held their breath. One little girl asked loudly, "Is that girl really flying the plane?" Her mother replied softly, "She's our angel today." Those words hit Ava's heart. She wasn't just flying, she was holding lives, entire futures, entire families. She had never felt courage like this, the kind that comes from having no choice but to be brave. London Control spoke again. "Ava, listen carefully. Just follow my voice. We will take you all the way to a safe landing. You're not alone, not alone." Not falling, not failing. For the first time since entering the cockpit, Ava believed she could do this. She adjusted her grip on the controls. Her hands still trembled, but less. Fear was still there, but hope was louder. London Control, she said, a spark of confidence growing. What's next? The controller smiled behind his microphone. We're going to guide you to the runway, step by step. You're going to bring everyone home. A cheer erupted from the passengers as the flight attendants made the announcement. The plane is stable, we are flying again. People clapped, cried, hugged strangers. Hope spread faster than panic ever had. Ava heard the sound of joy from outside the cockpit door, but she couldn't celebrate yet. She stared straight ahead, eyes locked on the horizon. Her heart still raced, but it wasn't only fear now, it was determination. She whispered to herself, "You are a pilot, not someday, right now." And far below, the ocean glistened, waiting for the brave girl in the sky to write the next chapter of a miracle. Ava thought the hardest part was over when she stopped the plane from falling. But flying steady in a calm sky was one thing, flying through the chaos that waited ahead was something entirely different. The first raindrops hit the windshield like tiny bullets, tapping faster and louder until the whole cockpit sounded like a drum. Thick, dark clouds rose in front of her, towering walls of turbulence, hiding lightning inside them like exploding veins of light. The peaceful blue sky had vanished, replaced by a nightmare of thunder and wind. Ava, the calm voice from London Control warned, "You are entering a storm system. We're working to guide you around it, but for now you must stay in control. Trust your instruments." A flash of white lightning cracked across the sky, so close it lit the cockpit like a camera flash. Ava flinched, heart jumping. The plane jolted violently as turbulence punched it from below. Passengers screamed, oxygen masks swinging wildly above their heads. Overhead bins rattled like they might burst open. The altimeter needle shook. Wind shoved the aircraft from both sides, like invisible hands trying to rip the wings off. "London Control, I'm losing stability," Ava cried. "Keep your wings level." The controller coached, voice steady. "Don't fight every bump. Let the aircraft ride the air. Smooth inputs, Ava, smooth." She tried, her hands guiding the yoke gently, the way her instructor had taught her in that tiny training plane. But this jet was huge, heavy, and alive with power. It fought back against her touch. Another violent shudder. The storm roared louder, rain hammering against the metal skin of the plane. Ava could barely see anything outside now, just angry clouds swirling like a monster waiting to swallow them whole. Inside her headset, a new alarm, a sharp, terrifying beep. She glanced down. Fuel LOW, you warning, flashed on the display. Her stomach twisted. "Control, we're running low on fuel, we know." The voice replied carefully, "You need to get through these clouds quickly, Ava. The nearest airport is less than 100 kilometers away. Just hold on a bit longer, hold on." Two simple words, but so heavy. The wind slammed the aircraft sideways. Ava gripped harder, knuckles turning white. Her heartbeat hammered painfully in her chest. Her breathing stuttered. Tears blurred her vision. "No, I can't cry now." She blinked them away, forcing her focus back on the instruments. She whispered to the yoke, to the engines, to the wings, as if the plane could feel her desperation. "Please, please don't give up on me." A strong gust threw the plane downward. Oxygen masks dropped throughout the cabin. People screamed, grabbed for anything solid. Some prayed loudly. Some hugged each other like it might be their last moment alive. Ava felt the drop in her stomach like a roller coaster plunging. Her headset almost slipped off. She wrestled with the yoke, pulling back, leveling the wings again. "Turbulence is temporary," she repeated to herself. "Just fly the airplane." She remembered her instructor's voice. "The aircraft wants to fly, let it." Lightning exploded outside again, so close it lit up the passengers' faces in a ghostly blue flash. The thunder followed immediately, shaking the plane violently. Another warning blared, "Sink rate, sink rate." Ava maintained pitch. ATC instructed sharply, "I'm trying." She shouted, voice cracking, "The wind is pushing us down. You've got this." The controller insisted. You've already done the impossible. Don't stop now. Impossible, yes, she had already done impossible things tonight. But this storm felt like it wanted to tear that victory away. Ava shut her eyes for 1 second, just one, and let her fear scream inside her where no one else could hear it. Then a different voice rose in her mind, not from ATC, not from the passengers, her inner voice, you can save them. She opened her eyes again, fierce determination replacing panic. I won't let this plane fall, she whispered, her hands steadied, her breathing slowed. She flew not with fear but with purpose. She nudged the aircraft upward, pushing it through the thickest part of the clouds. The turbulence grew even worse, vibrations so strong the controls buzzed in her hands. She leaned forward as if her body alone could help the jet fight through the air. Then suddenly the clouds thinned. Light shimmered. Like breaking the surface of a stormy ocean, the aircraft burst out of the cloud layer into a calmer sky. The rain softened, the wind quieted, and the alarms slowed their furious beeping. Ava gasped a trembling breath, as if she herself had been drowning. But relief was short-lived. London Control spoke again. You're almost there, Ava, but fuel is critical now. You need to prepare for landing. Her heart jumped. Landing, the part she had feared most. In training, she had landed small planes dozens of times, on sunny days, on calm runways. But landing a massive jet, in bad weather with 300 lives depending on her, that was something no simulator could ever prepare her for. Ava, ATC continued, descend to 20 feet. We're lining you up with a runway, just keep flying straight. She nodded, even though they couldn't see her. I'm ready, but was she? Her shaking legs said no, her racing heart said no, yet her hands, steady now, said yes. She pushed the thrust levers gently back, watching the altitude drop. The storm still rumbled behind them, but now the sky ahead was opening, softer clouds, calmer winds. Suddenly, a faint glow below the clouds. Ava squinted, her eyes widened, lights, tiny in a line like stars on the ground. Then clearer, brighter, aligned in perfect formation, the runway, the safe place, the finish line of this nightmare. Ava, do you have the runway in sight? The controller asked. Yes, she breathed out. Yes, I see it. Passengers who had been silent for minutes now heard the announcement. We can see the runway. The cabin erupted. Cries of joy, people hugging strangers, prayers turning into celebration. A surge of hope as bright as those runway lights. Ava stared at the glowing path below, a lifeline stretching through the dark. She whispered to herself, to every fearful doubt still clinging to her mind, this is it, we're going home. The storm drifted behind them, defeated. Fuel alarms still flashed, urgent reminders, but the runway, the promise of survival, shined right ahead. Ava tightened her grip on the controls. Everything she had ever dreamed of, every lesson she had ever learned, would be tested in the next few minutes. She wiped the last tear from her cheek, straightened her posture, and prepared for the most important landing in the world. The girl who once looked at planes with wonder was now about to land one and save 300 souls. Ava's heartbeat thundered louder than the engines as the airport drew closer, every second tightening fear and hope together inside her chest. The runway lights were now clear and bright, stretching like a silver river guiding her home. She had trained for landings many times, but never with people screaming behind her, never with lightning chasing her tail. Never with an aircraft so giant that its weight seemed heavier than the world. All right, Ava, London Control said gently into her headset. You're lined up beautifully. Just remember, small corrections. You're almost there. Almost. The most dangerous word in aviation. The altimeter ticked downward. 500 feet, 400 feet, 300 feet. The plane began to shake again, this time not from the storm but from the wind rolling off buildings on the ground. Ava tightened her grip. The yoke felt slick from sweat, but she refused to let it slip. Speed's a little high, ATC warned. Pull back just a touch good, hold it right there. Ava's breath came in short bursts, her eyes didn't blink, afraid to lose focus for even a fraction of a second. The passengers stared out windows, runway lights reflected in their wide, tear-filled eyes. The world below looked close enough to touch. 200 feet. The nose dipped slightly. "Careful, Ava." The controller coached, tone steady as steel. "You've got this, level wings," she corrected. A tiny movement with massive consequence. The aircraft floated lower 100 feet. A hush swept through the cabin so deep it felt sacred. Every cry turned into silence. Every prayer held its breath. Ava heard nothing now except the voice in her ears and the roar of fate rushing toward her. "Gently, gently," said ATC. "Now, flare." She pulled the yoke back for a moment. The massive airplane hovered, suspended between disaster and triumph, then slam. The wheels hit the concrete hard. Metal screeched against earth. Sparks burst like fireworks across the runway. Gasps rose. Some screamed, but the aircraft stayed upright. The jet rumbled forward, slowing until finally it stopped. For a heartbeat there was silence, then the cabin erupted. Cheers exploded like thunder through the fuselage. People leaped from their seats, crying, laughing, holding onto strangers as if they had known them forever. Parents hugged children with trembling arms. Passengers shouted her name, chanting, "Ava, Ava, Ava," but Ava couldn't move. She sat frozen in the captain's chair, hands still gripping the controls, legs shaking, mind barely able to register the miracle she had just performed. Her headset crackled one last time. "Ava, you did it. You brought them home." She sniffed, tears spilling freely now, not from terror, but from relief so powerful it stole her breath. The world outside her window was spinning with flashing lights, fire trucks, and ambulances racing to the aircraft. The cockpit door burst open. Crew members rushed in, voices stumbling over their own excitement. "You landed us. You actually landed us." But Ava's eyes were fixed on the two pilots beside her. Paramedics swarmed them, checking their pulse, lifting them carefully onto stretchers. They were alive. Weak but alive. A wave of emotion hit Ava hard. She had saved them too. A flight attendant kneeled next to her, placing a soft hand on her shoulder. "You saved everyone," she whispered, "all 300 souls." Ava shook her head slowly in disbelief, in exhaustion. She had never felt so small and yet so strong. For hours she had fought storms, alarms, fear, and fate itself. Now she finally released the yoke. Her wrists ached, her shoulders burned, but her heart felt light, like the plane was still flying somewhere inside her. The cabin door opened, stairs rolled up, emergency lights flashing bright red and white. One by one, passengers exited, each looking toward the cockpit, searching for the face of the young hero who refused to let them die. Ava stood at last, legs trembling, and stepped into the cabin. The moment people saw her, the applause roared even louder. They stretched their hands toward her, some bowed their heads, some cried openly. One elderly man simply mouthed, "Thank you." A mother lifted her toddler toward Ava. The child reached out and wrapped tiny arms around her neck, not understanding the miracle, only feeling safe in the arms of the girl who looked like an angel. Police officers and firefighters escorted her outside. The wet runway reflected the emergency lights like a glowing mirror. Reporters in raincoats gathered near the perimeter, cameras flashing, voices shouting her name. The storm had passed, leaving the night washed clean. Ava looked up at the giant aircraft behind her, its silver body glistening under the floodlights. Minutes ago, it had been a falling, terrified machine. Now it was a survivor because she believed she could save it. London Control's voice came over a handheld radio one last time. "Ava Mitchell, you are a hero tonight." She smiled weakly, tears still streaking her cheeks. I just didn't want anyone to die," she whispered. And that humble truth made her heroism shine even brighter. Paramedics asked to check her vitals. But as she sat in the ambulance, she could still feel the plane's vibrations in her hands. She would relive that landing for the rest of her life, but she had no regrets, no fear left, only gratitude that her courage became the wings for so many. 18 years old, a student pilot, and she saved 300 lives. News would travel across the world. The girl who landed a passenger jet alone. A real-life aviation miracle, families reunited, pilots recovering, and at the center of it all, a young woman who stepped into fear and transformed it into hope. When asked what made her stand up when everyone else froze, Ava gave a simple answer: someone had to fly the plane, but everyone knew not just anyone could have done what she did. She didn't just land a jet, she landed dreams, she landed futures. She landed hearts back into the arms of those who loved them. And though she walked away in silence, the world would remember her roar. A true hero of the sky, a miracle in motion. Ava Mitchell, the 18-year-old girl who saved 300 lives, airplane, glowing